Welcome to Politics by Faith. Thanks for being here. We just recorded a special on Antifa. What is Antifa? Where do they come from? We go back to 1930s Germany, because that is in fact where they come from. So we did that in our monologue, and then we followed the money with Seamus Bruner. After we talked to Seamus Bruner, we followed the money, then we followed the violence with a reporter who serves on the ground and follows Antifa around, knows more about them than anyone. Both of these gentlemen went and were involved in the White House roundtable on Antifa not too long ago. So we'll start with our monologue and Seamus Bruner following the money here. America is the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our special, the Antifa religion. Antifa has been named a terrorist group. This is our Attorney General just the other day. The President has talked about this a lot as well. Today's show is going to be about what is Antifa? And then we'll talk to someone who has followed the money, and we'll talk to someone who has followed the violence. And then we'll wrap up with our Politics by Faith segment of this all. First, who are these people? Well, what do they do? Actually, let me start with what do they do. Here's one example. 4th of July, 2025, at an ICE detention facility in Alvarado, Texas, south of Dallas. 2 people in this group. Look at the group. Look at these are the mug shots of the people who were, all of them who were arrested. Look at these absolute just total losers. And we'll get to that point in a little bit. But 2 of them in particular were charged with terrorism offenses. Now they all took part in this Antifa cell that planned an attack. And they planned it purposefully on the 4th of July. They were masked up, dressed in black as they do. And they arrived at a facility late at night, vandalized cars and cameras. Law enforcement responded. These terrorists shot back, shot a police officer in the neck. They also used fireworks and other explosives as distractions during their ambush. Police say they used reconnaissance on the center to find out how they could inflict the most damage. And a leader of this group trained the subordinates in firearms and close quarter combat, and they owned more than 50 weapons. The indictment calls Antifa a militant enterprise made up of networks of individuals and small groups, primarily ascribing to a revolutionary, anarchist, or autonomous Marxist ideology. So that's their technical definition. And they call for the overthrow of the United States government and law enforcement authorities in the system of law in general. So first thing we need to debunk is this idea like, oh, well, Antifa means anti-fascist. So they're good. If fascist, this is serious, like most people stop here. This is seriously most people in this country. They're like, fascism bad, anti-fascist good. And they're like, oh, it's in the name. What do you mean they're bad? How can you be okay with that level of thinking and that's it? You can call yourself anything. Look at what they do. Right? Like Planned Parenthood could call themselves, we love babies. But what do they actually do? When these activists call you a fascist for no reason, other than it just sounds harsh. That's why they like that word. You're not a fascist, of course, but it's like an F word, right? You're a fascist. No backing at all, no truth, of course, but it doesn't matter. It just sounds bad, right? So if you're a fascist and they're anti-fascist, they're anti-you. But people are like, oh yeah, that's therefore good. So where does this come from? Actually, it goes back to the 30s. Antifa was started in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. So the Nazis took over Germany. Now, this is an interesting history thing that made me stumble for a minute. When we think Nazis and communists, I think most Americans, myself included, we just put them in the same category as bad. We're just like, bad. But then we kind of think of them as the same because they're in the same box. They hated each other, right? The communists of the Soviet Union fought against the Nazis. They hated each other. There were battles in Germany between the Nazis and the communists. They hate each other. And that's interesting. Like, why? Well, they got a couple of differences, right? So the communists are all about equality, right? Theoretically, about equality. And the Nazis were about hierarchy. And the communists were an international movement. They were like, workers of the world unite. And the Nazis were about nationalism. So pretty like fundamental differences. The communists thought that a class struggle was the most important thing. And the Nazis were focused on a race struggle, right? So different, both wrong, of course, but different. But in Germany, the Nazis won. So the communists got together, and by the way, so the communists called them fascists. The communists called the Nazis fascists. So the communists became anti-fascist, or Antifa. So this is important for a couple of reasons. First, when you think anti-fascist, or the Antifa, just think communist. That's what they are. They're communists. They've always been communists. From the beginning, they were literally the communists. The communist people hated the Nazis. They're fascists, we're anti-fascists, we're communists. It's just a synonym for communists. That's it is. You can even see it in their, and they know this too, like you can see it in their Antifa logo. It's the same logo from 1930s Germany. It's a black and red flag. This is what the communists in Germany in 1930s came up with. Isn't that amazing? It's just the old communist iconography. Actually made by two guys who are members of it was called the Association of Revolutionary Visual Artists. They were just communist propaganda artists, right? So they're the ones who came up with the flag, and now it's the same flags that they use today. All right, another debunking here. People will be like, oh, Antifa, they're not organized. Therefore, it's not real. And because it's not real, they're not dangerous. It's just a boogeyman you guys are making up. They're not organized, therefore not real, therefore not dangerous. That's so absurd. They're, first of all, obviously real, just eyeballs. But you can have a large group of people organized in a decentralized way, right? You could be decentralized, but still organized, especially with the internet now. Back in the day, you couldn't do that, right? You needed to get together, there needed to be a hierarchy, all that. But with the internet, you can be connected online all around the world with no real figurehead, but just enough to radicalize and push people into violence and destruction. Like the murder of Charlie Kirk. Did there need to be a ringleader to get him to do that? Like the guy who assassinated Charlie Kirk, he needed a boss who needed a higher boss to tell. Like, no, you don't need that stuff. I mean, Satan's the head of Antifa. He's the father of lies. That's all the organizational structure these people need. The goal of these Antifa people is just to destroy. It's what they do. And if your goal is to destroy, you're not really one for organization anyway. So you can't judge them by who they say they are. Just look at their fruit. Just look at the fruit. Of course it's real. And of course we know what they're standing for is bad. I saw this picture the other day of George Floyd Square. Chris Rufo took this. He went and visited it in person. George Floyd Square. This is where George Floyd died of his drug overdose. So there's the food store, right, that's called Cup Foods. They renamed their name to Unity Foods. And it's all George Floyd everything. It's a big giant shrine to George Floyd because the guys who work there are like, don't blame us. We just called the police because he used counterfeit money. Like, sorry. And there's this big sign paid for by the state. It's like an official sign, like a road sign. It says Historic George Floyd Memorial. And then underneath it, it says Emez Wright Memorial. I said, Emez Wright? Who's Emez Wright? Emez Wright was shot and murdered in George Floyd Square in a drive-by shooting. He was just standing on the sidewalk and some guy rolls up to him and just murders him right there on the streets and drives away. Okay, so there's your George Floyd Square. But this picture right here of this abandoned gas station, spray painted across the front, where there's people, there's power. Maybe except the power to run a functioning gas station? Like you don't have that. You don't have the power to run a functioning society for sure. You can't even run the gas station. You drove them out of business and you've done nothing. The gas station used to be a speedway. They covered up speed, you see there, and they wrote People's Way. How's it going? Communists. And then on the right-hand side, you see Malcolm X says, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. No one involved in Antifa or any of this stuff has ever prepared for anything in their life ever. Like nothing productive. Maybe they're planning the next, attacking an ICE facility. But that's it. That's all they can do. They can't plan their life. Now, you'd think George Floyd Square would be the most prosperous part of town. You'd think the people involved, if they were good people who built and create things, you'd think George Floyd Square would be hustling, bustling, beautiful. They'd have a school there with the best kids would have the best grades, and they'd have beautiful housing and stores. They'd be like this great, thriving, wonderful part of town. Of course not. Of course not. Look how bleak it is. And that's America's future. If we don't stop these people, because that's what they want. That's all they can do. Last point. Then people get stuck up on this, especially designating them as a terrorist organization. Like, oh, they're Americans. Yeah, like we can have enemies domestic. I don't think we pay enough attention to this idea of enemies foreign and domestic. When you make an oath, when you become a senator, or even to join the military, the line is, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against who? It doesn't just say support and defend it. It says against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's true for the military as well. We have domestic enemies. I mean, goodness, the Democrats spent the last 4+ years calling us terrorists, all providing cover for them. I'm more concerned about enemies domestic than I am enemies foreign, because the enemies domestic can hide behind their constitutional rights, all while seeking to destroy the country we love.
This is a money story. And at the Government Accountability Institute, my colleague and I, Peter Schweitzer and our team, we followed the money, and we followed it to the top of what we call the protest industrial complex, Riot Inc. And we found a network of NGOs. It's not just the Soros network, the Open Society network, it's other funding networks, the Arabella funding network, the Tides funding network, Neville Roy Singham and his network, Foreign Cash. And it's also big left-wing funders. Some of them are not citizens of this country. Mr. Hans-Jörg Wyss of Switzerland. They're pouring money into this entire ecosystem.
All right, this is amazing. We're talking to that guy right there, Seamus Bruner from the Government Accountability Institute, the best at following the money. Seamus, super grateful you're here. Tell us about that time at the White House, just how it happened, what it was like being in the White House, et cetera.
Oh, it was amazing, Mike. It's great to be with you. I got a call saying, can you come up and brief the White House? I thought it would be White House staff, found out the day of it would be President Trump and his top cops. So I got a little nervous, like, man, this better be a good one. I also realized pretty quickly that the other people there would be, the brave journalists on the ground who are putting their life at risk to document all the crimes of Antifa. So I realized, especially so, that the money is going to be an important part of this, because we know about the violence. Everyone wants to know, where's the money coming from?
Yeah, real quick. I've always called it Antifa. You call it Antifa? I hear more of that too.
Yeah, Antifa, it changes day to day, but I think you're right. Antifa, anti-fascists.
Okay, either way, that doesn't matter. The money's more important. So help us out here. Where does it start? Where does it trickle down? Or do you like to start at the bottom and go up?
Well, we start at the top. I mean, we actually aren't, my opinion on Antifa is there's a lot of violent groups, not just Antifa, and they can drop the name Antifa any day and say, instead today, we're pro-democracy, we're pro-Dems. So the message I wanted to convey to the White House is that there is an entire ecosystem that enables this protest industrial complex, what we call Riot Inc. It's not just the violent boots on the ground. It's the bail funds that get them out of jail as quickly as possible and back onto the streets to cause chaos. It's the lawyers groups. There's all kinds of lawyers groups that help defend violent criminals. I mean, of course, they deserve to be defended, but trying to get them out, and we have so many repeat offenders here. So that's part of it. You've got the PR arm, the propaganda arm of the protest industrial complex, saying that Antifa doesn't exist. Everybody that we don't like is a fascist. And what do we do with fascists? Well, you know the rest. So that's the message I wanted to convey. So we started at the top. We followed the money. We followed it all the way to the top. Yes, of course, it's George Soros and the Open Society network. It's also the Arabella funding network. It's also, the Tides network. And it's a pretty direct pass through from taxpayer funding into things like Tides. Tides will then turn around and fund all kinds of groups. Antifa does not have a LLC or a 501c3 that it can receive funding from, but that's why it's bigger than Antifa. You've got groups like there was one down in Atlanta. Most of its money came from the Tides network. It was called the Network for Strong Communities. Its top executives, top founders and board members, they were involved in this riotous event called Stop Cop City, where they were attacking the Atlanta Police Department. They were charged, more than 60 people were charged with violent crimes ranging from, just arson and assaulting law enforcement all the way up to domestic terrorism. Now, that became a RICO investigation because of all of the money flows. Charges of money laundering were made. It's still an ongoing case. Some of the charges are being dropped because of various prosecutorial issues. But nonetheless, it was extremely violent. People were burning things, beating up police officers. There were weapons, guns, and stuff involved. I think one person got shot. And then you just look at the anti-ICE riots and the anti-ICE, it's still ongoing in Portland. I believe this weekend is going to be pretty hot. Chicago, Seattle. And there's all kinds of groups, not just Antifa, that facilitate, enable, and perpetrate some of these crimes.
Tell me more about the Tides Foundation. What is their stated mission, and who donates to the Tides Foundation?
Yeah, the Tides Foundation is just like the Arabella Network. It's and just like really a lot of the Soros entities, which is it exists as a pass-through. I mean, their stated objective is probably something like to do the most good for everyone or something. But what it really is it's just a dark money pass-through where George Soros gives a lot of money through Tides. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, a lot of the control oligarchs we've talked to in the past, they make huge donations to Tides. Tides will then distribute it. Mark Benioff of Salesforce, the Salesforce Foundation, they gave over $20 million into Tides, which then, and then they say, well, we don't know what Tides does with it after we give it to them. But it's like, well, we've got a pretty consistent pattern here of these groups down at the lower levels on the ground committing all kinds of chaos and mayhem.
Even like best case scenario, let's say that Salesforce guy, like why does he think he's giving to Tides? And like the answer could be, oh, he knows he's funding Antifa to kill cops. Or it's like, oh no, I think they're involved in, like what's like the best case scenario?
Oh, that's a brilliant question, Mike, because we haven't even gotten into the other things. I mean, we're just focused on Riot Inc. right now, but that's just one initiative of this, dark money left-wing network. They've got the migrant resettlement initiatives. They've got the climate alarmism initiatives. They've got, crucially, the get out the vote ballot chasing initiatives. So Riot Inc. is kind of like just the military paramilitary arm, yes. But maybe Mark Benioff thinks that he's funding the helping migrants get resettled in the country part of it, or the climate justice part of it.
Okay, who's in charge? Who runs the Tides Foundation? Who's the one who's distributing the money to all the different smaller groups?
They're Democrat activists. I could get you their names. They're in some of our reports. I don't remember them offhand, but they're just kind of shadow operators. They're not household names.
Okay, so rich people donate to the Tides Foundation. It sounds good. It's a nice name. I'm supporting election integrity. This group of activists have millions of dollars at their disposal. They hand it out to hundreds, thousands of smaller groups. Like how many are there? That's one question. And then what do those
our
groups
database,
do with the money? Is there another pass through?
Yeah, our database that we put together, and it's painstaking work going through hundreds and hundreds of 990s. So basically every year, Tides, and it's got 5 or so sub-entities, Tides Nexus, Tides Center, Tides Foundation. Each one of them has to file a document at the end of the year declaring who they gave money to. The Soros network has a dozen or more. The Arabella network has more than 7. And so each one of those, I mean, we're talking about in our database over 50 individual NGOs. You go back 5 years, you're talking about 250 990s. And then we go through them and they each have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grants. So our database has over 200,000 grants. Now, a lot of those are repeats to the same entities, like the ACLU, for example, will get like between these different groups, $50 million spread across 100 or 200 grants. But we're talking thousands and thousands of over 200,000 individual grants, probably to, I'd say 500 or more, maybe over 1,000 different entities. I mean, it's a dizzying number. Just the No Kings protests and the protest organizers, that was over 200. And we're not even talking about the ballot chasing and the immigration.
So let's say there's one more pass through, right? So they give the money to this one group, this one LLC or whatever. They then pass it on to like the people on the ground. who are those people on the ground, the lowest level, the foot soldiers, and what are they doing with this money that comes from the Tides Foundation in the beginning? What does it look like at the end?
Yeah, so using the Stop Cop City, which I believe is the most like clear example. There's been court records that we've been able to go through and really understand how these foot soldiers work. You've got the Network for Strong Communities. They are organizing the protests. They are organizing the events. They call themselves forest defenders. They sort of made this like an equal. It was like one part anti-cop, one part climate justice. And so they call it the forest defenders. They didn't want the police to build a training facility in this one forest. And so they're paying activists. I mean, I think the largest amount of this money is going towards the professional activists who need a salary in order to work all year long. They were building encampments in the forest. They were buying weapons, according to the court documents. They were buying, supplies for getting violent, riot shields and all the rest, helmets. And I would probably say the salaries are the most, like the biggest chunk of the dough. It doesn't cost a lot of money to build a Molotov cocktail. They're not using extremely expensive, sophisticated weaponry.
So just my last question. So the salary, so there's people in America who they say they work for Protect the Forest Atlanta, and they're getting paid what, $50K a year? Just
roughly,
to be
the
activists.
Yeah, roughly. I mean, some of them get more, and a lot of the lawyers, a lot of the money coming down from the top goes to the ACLU and the National Lawyers Guild, which are there to, protect the rioters. They'll only offer the evidence that the police got too brutal right after they got, beaten in the face or hit with a mortar or whatever. So lawyers cost a lot of money, and $50K would be about average salary of a professional organizer. I mean, sometimes more than six figures, but the Tides donation, this wasn't an extremely well-funded group. The Tides donation was only $160K.
So last question, you outline the money and you have more details, of course, than we were able to share here. You hand that over to the White House. What do you want them to do with that? What is your ultimate dream scenario?
Well, look, any criminal, any funding of criminality needs to be dealt with. It needs to be, they need to be brought to justice. I will say that I think the Tides and the Arabella networks and Soros networks, they're extremely sophisticated. Rockefeller's network has been doing this for 100 years, and they've got the best lawyers in the game. So what they do is they have all of the recipients of this money sign contracts saying, we promise we're not going to use this for criminal activity, criminal behavior. And that's what they're going to, hold up and say, look, we didn't know that any of this was going to happen. And they'll probably, they, like I said, got great lawyers, so they'll make a pretty strong case with that. But the thing is, the pattern here, over and over and over again, Riot Inc. pops up, and with the press of a button, you've got, crowds on demand, and time after time, they turn violent. They turn into assaults on law enforcement. They turn into, burning, the ice facility, trying to burn down ice facilities and stuff like that. Yep. So, follow the money and see if there's any way that you can get them on funding criminality through the pattern of it.
That's great. Seamus Bruner, Government Accountability Institute. Please go support them so that they and we all can properly counter the big money from the left. Seamus, great to talk to you, brother.
Thanks, Mike.
Keep it up. So Seamus mentioned that he's the guy, following the paper trail, following the money, but there's other people out there on the street risking their lives. We'll talk about one of those journalists who has been studying and following Antifa next.